Oh, you have to sign in. I didn't think about that. Just get off the wireless. No, an employee will be fine if you're on our wireless because they're probably signing. So just turn off your wireless.
But what if I'm an employee?
Great day, please.
They restricted. It's just, we're about to read all these, so they need to be turned on. As long as we turn on.
It's too late to get
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for your patience as we got the audio figured out here. Welcome to the employee question and answer session. This was a decision by the board to allow you as employees to ask questions. As the email indicated, you will need to have your badge visible if you'd like to ask a question to make sure that you are an employee. I also, just quick housekeeping, this screen up here is you. You are on live stream right now. So just make sure, if your nose itches or whatnot, not for an extended amount of time or you're itching that nose. But we are going to go ahead and get started. And so I do want to introduce, we're going to have a couple people helping us moderate today. So I'm Elizabeth Vincent, Director of Continuous Improvement, and Jessica Goldberg, our Director of Communications and Marketing. What we're going to be doing is we're going to start off by allowing our first candidate, Dr. Huff, to say a few words. If you got to hear the interview, you saw that she asked a lot of questions. But we want to give her an opportunity just to say a few words about herself, her background, personal and professional experience. Then what we'll do is we'll start taking questions. So if you'll raise your hand, we're going to kind of split the room and kind of go back and forth and allow you an opportunity to ask your questions. So without any further ado, we are going to get started. And so Dr. Huff, we'll turn it over to you to share a little bit about yourself.
All right. This is, I think you may have to turn it down a little bit late. I don't know. Okay. I do have a cheerleader voice because I was once a cheerleader, so don't have to have the microphone. I am Angela Huff, of course, and I have been in education. This is year 38 for me in education. I grew up in Nashville, did all of my schooling, former year schooling in Nashville from first grade all the way to 12th grade. And then transitioned from Nashville to Georgia. My father was a United Methodist minister, and my mother was a teacher, and so she taught in Metro Nashville Public Schools. So I did a lot of work in her classroom on bulletin boards and all those different things that we do when we help teachers. So that's really where my love for teaching came from helping in my mom's classroom. After graduating from high school, went to Georgia for college, and remained there, as my mother says, went to Georgia and never came back home. So stayed in Georgia, graduated from college, and then began teaching right away. And after a few years of teaching, started my master's degree and then specialist degree after that. And along the way, got married and all those different kinds of things. And had children. I retired from Georgia in 2016 after serving as a teacher there, a principal there, an assistant superintendent, and chief of staff. And retired to come back here to help take care of our parents. My husband and I relocated back here to help take care of our parents. But then when we got here, our parents at that time, one was 100 years old and the other one was 82. And they both looked at us and said, I don't know why you're here because we don't need any help. And so I started thinking about what maybe I could do since they didn't need our help. And some of you may have heard me tell the board this at the very beginning. I started looking for different school districts where I might want to go, where I thought I could add value. When Clarksville-Montgomery County School System opened up their chief of staff position, I applied for that, and that's what brought me here. And so this is year 4 for me being in the system. Personally, I have a husband, and I have 3 children, and I have 1 3-year-old granddaughter. And she's in Georgia. I most recently saw her at her 3rd birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese. So much fun. Hadn't been to Chuck E. Cheese in a while, so that was fun. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Dr. Huff. All right, so we're gonna open up the floor for questions. I will ask, since we are live streaming so that folks can hear what your question is, that you do speak into the microphone. So we'll start. Does anybody have a question for our first candidate, Dr. Huff?
Hi, Dr. Huff. My name is Daryl Crawford. I'm the school counselor at West Creek Middle School. And my question to you is, how are you going to support, as our director of schools, to better support our school counselors so that we can focus on our American School Counselor Association guidelines with giving our kids 80% direct services and 20% indirect services, and taking away non-counseling duties such as 504s, S-teams, and other non-essential counseling duties?
Very good question. So initially what I would need to do is do a needs assessment of what is currently happening with the counselor's role and what kinds of things you're being asked to do. Of course, you just named some of those, but really taking a needs assessment across the district to just determine what all those things are. And then working with my curriculum and instruction team and looking at what ways can we assist with those things that are on your plate that keep you away from your 80-20. I think that's very important. We know the role has increased for our counselors with our students returning since COVID and having 97% of our students in our buildings currently. We need to make sure that we're taking care of the needs that they have. So essentially, initially taking a needs assessment district-wide to make those specific determinations of what we need to try to look at from removing from your place. Okay? Mm-hmm. Yes.
Other questions?
Good evening, Dr. Huff. I am Chris Gerald. I'm an art teacher at Montgomery Central High School. I'm also the vice president of the Clarksville-Montgomery County Education Association. My question to you tonight is, what issues within the district do you see as your day 1 top priority issues as the new director? And if you could please give examples on how you plan to address those issues. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're very welcome. So I would say top priority day 1, since I've already been in the district for a few years and been in this position for 10 months. Top priority is going around and meeting with staffs and determining from staffs what do they see as the most pressing thing that's going on that I need to know about. It's so very different when you're, and I've noticed this, so very different when I was in the role as chief of staff as opposed to interim. I get different information as the interim than what I got as chief of staff. So when I'm doing my school visits, pieces of information are shared with me that I didn't know when I was chief of staff. So going around and being able to evaluate and listen, just really a listening kind of tour. And then after getting that information, sharing that information with our team, with our senior leadership team and our executive cabinet, to just see if these are just new things that maybe I wasn't aware of, or if these are consistent kinds of things that I'm learning about. So really listening for the strengths and the weaknesses of the different school staffs. So starting with that principal and any persons that the principal may think that I might need to meet with on that staff, or just simply having staff meetings just to hear what's going on in the buildings. Good and bad.
Other questions?
Good evening, Dr. Huff. I'm Constance Brown, I'm a success coach at Early Technical College at TCAT, and I am the president of the Clarksville-Montgomery County Education Association. In a recent collaborative conferencing survey, 67% of teachers said they had considered alternate employment this year. As director, what will you personally do to improve teacher morale?
So I think that's very important, Constance. Being a former teacher, I realize how important it is for us to feel good about where we work. Feeling good about when we come into our buildings, being happy to be there. Now I know that every day you can't be happy. I understand that. You all know that you can't be happy every single day, right? Right. Okay, you can't be happy every single day. However, I think it's important to be able to listen to our teachers. And I shared this kind of in my interview with all the pressure, that is on teachers now, and all the responsibilities. What kinds of things can we look at removing off your plate, or from your responsibility. So really seriously doing that kind of audit and seeing a list of all the things that you're required to do and seeing if there's anything that we can take away. I think if there are things that we can remove from the plate, I think that will help with morale for sure. And so looking at that district-wide to determine what those things are. Also, meeting with yourself and Kathy, from PET, and looking and seeing what other things that might be crucial in helping with morale. We did a few things this year with our incentives with pay to help with those kinds of things, to shore that up. However, I know there are other things that are not necessarily associated with pay, but other things to help you. So I think it'll be very important to just listen, and that could be a part of that listening tour that I have, as Chris asked, on day one, what would you do? I think that would be a part of it as well, to handle, or not handle, but listen to what those morale issues are and see if there are things that we can be proactive in handling for our teaching staff.
Hey everybody. Hi, Dr. Huff.
Hi.
I'm Dr. Young. I'm one of the school psychologists here in the district. I wrote down my question, and it says that you spoke about easing the workload of teachers as you would like to use quantitative data in order to investigate what is needed from teachers and what is not in order to make work lighter. And we know that data can be skewed at times. Is it possible that you could use qualitative data as well, as a dissatisfaction of school leadership can also play a part of being unable to retain teachers in the school district? And I know that you stated that you have communication groups that bring you concerns of the teachers, of school staff, but are they speaking for the 16% of staff whom are minorities?
And they may not be, and so I think that whenever you're listening to anyone's concerns, I think as a leader, you have to know that there are other pieces of information that is not being shared with you. You have to know that. And, in my experience with having, been a teacher, been a principal, been all the different roles that I've done, I know that whenever I'm getting data, I need to also have in my mind that there are other pieces that are missing. So I think it's just a matter of being open-minded and listening and proactively listening and looking for a plan that could be made as it relates to meeting the needs of wherever those gaps are. I think, in my interview, I mentioned that I wanted to have open office hours. I think it's important to do that and provide that for staff members, for parents, stakeholders, to have that opportunity for someone to come where you're not necessarily in front of an audience, you're not necessarily, at a board meeting for public comment, but you're just with me and sharing that information that I might need to know. Because as I share it with the board, once I know something, I feel that I have to at least investigate it. I may find there's nothing there, but I at least have to investigate it. It's very important to me to do that. And the other piece of that is that you want to treat people the way that you want to be treated. That's so very important to do. And so in leadership, sometimes we may forget to do that piece because we're so busy doing all the other things that we forget the important piece, those soft things that are treating other people the way you want to be treated, listening to people with an open mind, not just totally being disengaged. I think that you have to be proactive in that with your constituents so that everybody feels valued, everybody feels heard. Even if we're not making the decision that you want us to make, at least you feel like you were heard, okay? So I think that's important in leadership. I hope I answered your question. All right, okay, all right.
This side over here, y'all are, I'm getting the workout on this side. There we go. All right.
Hello, Dr. Huff.
Hello.
So I have a two-part question. I know the answer to the first part, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. And then, so my first one is, do you support pre-K?
Mhm.
Okay. And then what would your plan be to implement universal pre-K in Clarksville-Montgomery County? And as well as the capacity of schools to add more programs?
Add more pre-K programs?
Yes.
Okay. So to answer your initial question, yes, I do support pre-K. I know the importance of that early learning and what benefit that provides to our families. I know in conversations that we've had at the senior leadership team, there are several members on our senior leadership team that also want to increase the number of pre-Ks and having that option available for families. So I think that my first step in that request of what you just asked is actually finding out all the information, doing a needs assessment, and looking and seeing, in the research what it's telling us and how to operate that. It's not something that you can do overnight, but it's something that you have to investigate and research and determine what's the best way to do it. So do I think it's important? Yes, ma'am, I do. The earlier we can get our babies, the better. That it is for them and their families and being instructed and getting that education, getting those foundational skills that will be so very important as they transition throughout school. So it's just looking into that and seeing how we can make that work and also having the funding for that. We don't ever want to start a program, I know our board doesn't ever want to start a program that we don't feel like we can fully fund. We want to be able to do that and provide every single aspect of the program that is available to us as far as the resources that would be needed. But just so you know, our senior leadership team has already started talking about that. It was mentioned not too long ago, the importance of trying to have additional pre-K programs within our school system.
Good evening, Dr. Huff. My name is Jarita Reese. I teach at Kenwood Elementary. My question is, what are your plans or ideas to improve the waning perception of our schools, teachers, and staff in the community?
Repeat your question.
Sorry. What are your ideas or plans to change or improve the waning perception of our schools, teachers, and staff within the community?
First of all, I think that, we need to understand where that's coming from, you know, understand, what is a perspective from some of our staff, as far as how they feel about our schools. I know when we, did our survey, there were, you know, some staff members that felt as though, that they're not heard, and felt as though, that they're not valued, and felt as though, their opinions may not matter. So for me, I think those are very important pieces that we need to address as a district staff. And looking at, well, why is that the case? Why do you not feel heard? Why do you not feel valued? Why do you not feel that you matter? So those are things that we really need to look at. And as far as the perception, the waning perception of our schools, I think I would need more information on that. And I think that will come when I have those meetings with school staffs to determine, okay, what is it that I need to know at this particular school that you feel is not positive about your school, and what can we do to fix that? So I think it's awareness and addressing, you know, what is shared with me with our senior staff, and just looking at it. But I don't think, I can't make a step-by-step plan until I know what the exact issues are. And when I know that, then I can go deeper as far as what we would do, okay? So initially, needs assessment, looking at that as it relates to when I come for staff meetings, and then also looking at how we can tell our stories better as far as what's going on in our schools. Because like I said in the interview, we're in charge of our story. So we have to be the one to tell our story. And in a matter of telling our story, we have to make sure we have all the information, okay? You're welcome.
Hi, Dr. Huff.
Hi.
I'm Melissa Lindsay. I'm a teacher, an English teacher at Montgomery Central High School, and I'm treasurer of CMCSS. And my question actually kind of follows up Jarita's a little bit. I think we're all aware of, the criticism that is so prevalent in our society today. And a lot of that criticism is aimed toward us as educators, as school districts. It's, many times we're told, whatever you do, don't read the comments, in social media and things like that. And so when we think about that public criticism, within our own classrooms with administrators and consulting teachers, we're told that we grow through constructive criticism. But a lot of what we get from the community, of course, is not constructive criticism, it's just criticism. So as director, how will you be able to handle, how will you handle that criticism that is directed toward our schools and sometimes at us personally?
So I think with addressing criticism, you have to make sure, for those persons that are providing that criticism, many times what I've found in my experience is that they don't know the whole story. They know a piece of the story. And many times that piece that they know is that negative piece, but they don't know all the other stuff in the background and what happened as a result of that. So I have found in my experience that when I share what the entire story is and how it really happened, then I have that other person saying, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that's what she said. I didn't know that's why that started, or what have you. But many times it's based on just a little piece of information that has blown up. I used to have a supervisor that would say, it's the mosquitoes that really bite you. And they're an itty bitty bug, and they really, really bite you. And you get those big bumps on your arms, from an itty bitty mosquito. But it's those little things that grow into big things. And when we allow it to grow into something bigger, when we could have taken care of it when it was itty bitty over here, then we wouldn't have that big issue where it's a blow up. So it's kind of like when we have a parent maybe complaining about something that happened in the classroom with their child. They've gotten their child's perspective of what has happened, but not the teacher's teacher perspective. And so they've already formed their opinion based upon what their child came home and shared with them. One of the things that I used to always do as a principal is if I had to discipline a child, and even when I was a classroom teacher, if I had to discipline a child or do something related to a student, I made sure I called that parent before that child got home so they could hear my perspective and what happened. That way, when they're getting that information from their child, they know the whole story. So I think that a lot of times that criticism comes from people not understanding sometimes a protocol that we may have to follow, sometimes just misinformation, and then sometimes just someone just wanting to be critical, So I think that once we break it down, par it down, and investigate exactly what it is, I think that helps people to understand the situation better and be less critical because they know the whole picture.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
Hi.
I'm Tanisha Taylor. I teach at the virtual K-12 school, special ed teacher, formerly with Kenwood. Harry Wong, the educator and the writer, he says the one that does the work is the one that does the learning. A lot of our students have learned that not doing the work can still be a reward for them. And so the question, they get grades that they're not earning, they're passed along, even though they haven't mastered anything. And then the next teacher's responsible for their, their scores and such. So my question is, what are your plans or ideas to address or improve a student accountability for their actual learning from the top? Yeah.
So I think with that one is, looking at what our students are producing and looking at, how they are producing that. And that would come from me meeting with our instruction department and looking at our students' scores and if they've been inflated and, all of that. But I think that comes also with having dialogue with teachers too, just like yourself. And you sharing the observations that, that you've made, and then us really investigating, is that the case? Parents have to accept responsibilities for their students and what their students are doing. And so having those honest conversations with our parents and sharing information just like what you shared, I think that's very important. That would be something I want to know as a parent, regarding my own child. So I think it's just a matter of the honest conversations and having those and those critical conversations and being able to make a plan going forward. So I think that's something that now that you shared with me, that I can't let go in my head. That's in my head now. And I'm gonna have to look into that and see how to best address that because I think that's a valid concern. So I'm glad you shared that. Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Huff.
Good evening.
I'm Denise Smith Martinez, and I serve actually 3 different roles in this city. One as an English teacher at Kenwood Middle, one as the chair of the Education Committee for the local NAACP, and also as the chair of the Human Relations Commission for the city of Clarksville. So my question includes diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Tennessee Department of Education compiled data that includes that only 13% of educators in Tennessee are educators of color, and only 20% of our administrators are of color. Now, we know about the Grow Your Own programs, but how do you envision CMCSS retaining quality and qualified educators and administrators of color? And how should CMCSS connect and act on this inequity across this domain?
Good question. And I've been working with my Chief Human Resources Officer regarding diversity and increasing those numbers. And so our HR department has written a plan as far as how to address that. We need to make sure that we're getting back in front of our colleges and universities in recruiting and retaining the teachers that we do have. But that recruitment piece is very important. For the last 2 years or so of COVID, we haven't been able to get to our universities our HBCUs to be able to recruit like we've done in the past. And so there's a focus now to make sure that we get back to that and reconnect with those universities. But also advertising our school system in ways, for example, we had a job fair at the end of March, and we had billboards all over the place. We even had a billboard in Dixon, where the Dixon superintendent got mad at me because we had one in there, but it's okay. It's all right, I was good with that. But he wasn't really mad at me, not really. I feel as though we need to ensure that we're advertising. CMCSS is a great place to teach, but we do need to seriously look at those numbers and making sure, because the staff that we presently have does not match our student population. And our student population has, our students, our student advisory committee, have made statements like, we want to see teachers that look like us. And it's important for that, and I get that. Being a minority myself, I get it. And I understand the importance of seeing someone that looks like you so that you can know that you're able to learn. You're able to be in different positions when you see others that look like you in those positions. So I understand the importance of that, and those are one of the things that I will work on to make sure that we're increasing that number. Even if I'm not chosen as director of schools, that would be something that I will work on consistently to make sure that those numbers are being increased. So thank you.
Other questions? We have about 30 more minutes this session. Scott, Elizabeth.
Good evening, Dr. Huff. You know me, we have our monthly district meetings, and Kathy Collins, Magnet, special teacher, I'll say a seasoned 42-year teacher. Taught in several states across, and also in Germany. But what I'm seeing more than anything today, and is most concerning, as you said, once you hear something, it gets in your head, you can't get rid of it, so put something in your head.
Thank you, Kathy.
In the last 2 weeks, I have heard of and seen, and firsthand experience with another person, educators being assaulted in the classroom and on campus. That's my main concern, because as a special educator, you have to get a hold of the social skills, the behavioral skills. You have to get that taken care of before you can see academic gains and academic achievement. So hearing the board's presentation last night on the student code of conduct being updated, that's all well and good, but I know that teachers are very concerned that I have to keep documenting. Every time something happens in the classroom, I have to take away from my instructional time to document this over and over again, only to find that the student ends back up in my classroom just a little while later, and I still have to deal with that student. So I know that discipline is one of your top priorities, as it is ours, but I'm just wondering how we're going to get a handle on this, because if we don't address the discipline issues and the assault on educators in our district, that doesn't set a good precedence for our perception, as was stated earlier, to our parents. Are we doing enough? What do we need to do? Just bring that in your head.
So, as I stated with the board at a board meeting a week or two ago, that no student or staff member should have to come to our schools in fear of being assaulted. That's just something I have no tolerance for. I don't feel like the job that you've chosen to come to, that you come to it and someone hits you, punches you, whatever that is. I just don't think that's acceptable. Now, I do know that we have some challenging students that have challenging behaviors. We have some students that are in our special needs, just like you just stated, Kathy, and we have to work through an IEP, for students. However, I still don't feel that it is appropriate for staff members to be assaulted. So what I will do and continue to do is look at ways that we can prevent that, look at those de-escalation trainings, also looking at working with our sheriff's department and our police department, and looking at what kind of steps can we take that are consistent as it relates to expectations. And a lot of that time in making those expectations to our staff and to our students, we also need to inform our parents. Our parents are a big part of this. And I think sometimes we leave them out of it, and they have to be a part of it. They have to partner with us and understand why we have to be consistent with our behavior consequences and why we have to do the things that we need to do to maintain order. Because you have to teach, and you have to be able to teach freely in your classroom. So I will look at, continuing to work with our sheriff, continue to work with our police department, continue to work with our staff, continue to make sure that we're reinforcing our student code of conduct, making sure that schools that have individual behavior plans, making sure that we're enforcing those consistently with our staff members. So all those different things, I think, all tie in together with discipline and making discipline better for our schools, and hopefully lessening the assaults that are happening to our staff members. But I know it's not gonna happen overnight. So with having, former experience being in the classroom, I know that's not gonna happen overnight. So it's something that we have to all work on together. It's not something that Angela Huff can do by herself, but it's something that we all can work on to make sure that we achieve that goal. Okay?
Any other questions? Sure, yeah. Does anybody else have a question for Constance? Okay, I'll hand this over to you.
Hi again, Dr.
Hi.
You have kind of answered this in your interview with the board, but I would just like for you to elaborate a little more on it. After years of data showing that teachers feel underappreciated, overworked, micromanaged, veteran teachers are now taking advantage of other job opportunities, and we are in the midst of a teacher shortage. While much is being done to recruit new teachers, these veteran teachers continue to feel overlooked. If you are selected as the next director of schools, what new ideas will you propose to retain the teachers already employed in this district?
Very good question. It's easy to pay close attention or closer attention to recruiting and getting additional staff. That would be easy for me to do. But we need to make sure that those persons that are in the field are feeling appreciated and taking care of them and ensure that they have all the things that they need. So number one, the first thing I'll do is not forget that. And making sure that I'm hearing that those members, the veterans, as you said, I'm a veteran too, so. But remembering the veteran staff and making sure that I'm hearing their voice, because their voice is important as well. There are things that a veteran would need that first or second year teachers don't need. And so just reassuring staff that we hear you, that you're valuable, and that we don't want you to leave for another position, because what you do for us adds value to our students. The wisdom that comes from our veteran staff is the wisdom that we can't get. We just can't. The institutional knowledge that you have within the school system, we can't get. And so we have to be very mindful of how valuable that is for us as a school district and not forget that. So if I am chosen as director, that would be something that I would key into to make sure, in working with our HR department, as well as our curriculum and instruction department, and as well as working with our CFO to ensure that we're doing all the things that we need to do to retain our staff. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening again. How do we solve the issue of groups of students who may be over or underrepresented in advanced course enrollment or gifted and talented programs, and what solutions do you offer to this issue?
So if I speak from my former experience as a classroom teacher and, my students being qualifying for being in the gifted program. I need to look at what those qualifiers are. What does it take for someone to qualify for those programs? And ensuring that there are not any kind of things within those qualifiers that would automatically not include someone. And so I think it's important to assess that, to see what those determining factors are for students to be in those advanced courses or being in those programs, the gifted and talented programs. And so that will be my first thing, to look at the qualifiers. And then also working with our staff to see if there's some additional things that we can look at as it relates to students being available to be in those programs and being identified as the students for those programs. So I think that would be really important to do because sometimes we're missing some kids that we feel in our classrooms should be considered. And so what are we doing that those students are not allowed to be in? Now, I understand that we have different protocols that we have to follow and different guidelines that we have to follow, but is there any kind of wiggle room within that? And I don't know that. And so that would be something that I would have to investigate. I don't want to sit here and say that I'm knowledgeable about that because I'm not. So I would need to do my research on that to find out if I have wiggle room. And if I do, how can I implement that to be able to identify more students?
Okay.
Section over here. Good evening again.
Good evening.
Excuse me. Who oversees department heads and directors of efficacy? How can department heads and directors response to needs of those under them to be improved and addressed? Teachers receive evaluations, principals get 360s, yet many directors appear out of touch, unapproachable, and unwilling to rethink or change policies. So how can you change?
So as far as those supervisors also having 360s, is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah, I think it more or less goes under like we are told to do things and some of those things seem unnecessary and there are a lot of things on our plate. So again, it goes back to the efficacy of what they're asking us to do and then being out of touch because some of them have not been in the classroom in a while. So how can we address those issues that we have if we feel like it's not efficient for us? But who oversees their effectiveness as a director of elementary, higher, whatever department they may be in?
So if it's within, for example, in my role as the director, the interim director, I oversee the chiefs. So that the chiefs would be chief academic officer, chief financial officer, chief human resources officer, all of those persons. Those are persons that I personally supervise. Okay. And then those chiefs personally supervise the people that work within their departments. And so if there's issues as it relates to efficacy, or if there are issues as it relates to being able to supervise, those efficacy things would go into our human resources department. But if it's a question regarding adding additional 360s, that's something that I have heard before. Having additional supervisors or directors or other persons within supervisory roles also having 360 evaluations because some of them do not. And so maybe looking at how we can better utilize those persons as getting evaluations too, to be able to determine what kind of changes might need to be made as it relates to those individual departments. So that's something that was shared with me probably about, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. And so that's one of those things that's on my list as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Hello again. So I talked earlier about like criticism coming from, from our communities and from society. But another thing that a lot of us teachers talk about, and that a lot of veteran teachers, who may be getting close to retirement, discuss is that we also are being attacked from the legislature. Whether it is, that teachers need to have 12 months or 10 months of lesson plans a year ahead on, uploaded for community members to see, like they've done recently in Indiana, or in our own legislature, the recent library proposal that all books would have to be approved, and even in Williamson County with some banning of some books. What do you think your role and the district's role is in protecting our teachers and our students from legislation that is damaging or career altering?
So, as some of you may know, we have legislative priorities in our school system that our board establishes every year. We go through what we feel as though needs to be a priority, and we also solicit stakeholder feedback for our legislative priorities. Additionally, we have a director of continuous improvement that works along with me, and we meet with our legislators, our personal Clarksville-Montgomery County legislators, and sharing the needs that we have in our school system, ensuring that they know what we would want them to champion downtown under the Capitol building, and what things we don't want them to champion. So I think that relationship that we have with them is a fruitful relationship. It's a beneficial relationship. It's one that our director of continuous improvement meets with those persons on an annual, not an annual basis, on a regular basis, be it phone calls, emails, even going down there to the Capitol. And so that happens on a continual basis. And they, their ears are open to us. We meet with them face to face as well as in other avenues. So I think as long as we're keeping that relationship going and sharing with them what our concerns are as it relates to the legislative body, we're feeling like we've been heard. There were a few things this school year that they did not vote for and that did not make it because of the conversations that we had with them. And so we're very excited about that relationship and want to continue to strengthen that relationship. And those legislators are they're very well aware of Clarksville-Montgomery County and what things they need to do, or what things we'd like for them to consider to do to make us, our system better.
Hi. So we are often told that teaching is a calling and made to feel selfish when requesting a living wage. For example, home prices in Clarksville have risen 20% in the last 2 years. So as director, how will you bridge the gap between teaching being a calling and teachers being paid their worth as professionals?
So what I've done is I've worked with our CFO and we've made a decision that next year we're going to do a complete study of our budget and of our salaries, a complete workover, and really look at what our pay is and what things we might can do, what things we might can put in place as it relates to pay. So that was something that he and I talked about just really yesterday, but we've been talking about it over time, that next year is going to be our year to really look at that, because, you never could have told me years ago that we would have people that don't want to come to work. You never could have told me that, ever. I wouldn't have ever believed you. But that's where we live now. We live in a world where people don't want to work. They don't want to come to work. And so our employees here are valuable, very, very valuable. And we want to do whatever we can do to retain those employees. And so that's why we want to look at that and see if there are any changes that we can make as it relates to pay for our employees, so that we can keep our employees and so that we can continue to have build on morale with our employees. That's very important. Mm-hmm.
If you noticed from the teacher communication group last month, a perception is that many in the district feel that we are very top-heavy, with so many consultants, coordinators, and department heads at central office, in addition to the shortages that we have in our buildings. What are some plans or ideas that you have to address this issue?
So I've heard the top-heavy comment before, and so what we've been doing is looking at, essentially, are we really top-heavy? Really looking at our positions and the positions that we have, and seeing if that is truly the case. And so we're studying that right now to make that determination. And when we begin to look at the budget next school year to reevaluate the entire budget, looking to see if there's any positions that we don't need. With ESSER, we added a few positions. Of course, those are temporary positions because it's ESSER. And so we're going to continually evaluate that. Our ELC grant also brought some employees for our district, so we will continue to evaluate that to make sure that we're not top heavy, but we have started looking at that.
If there aren't any other questions, it's a school night, that's okay. But if anybody else has any others, we just have just a few moments. Of course, I do want to take this opportunity to remind you, as you saw in your email, cmcss.net/director-search. On there, you can provide your feedback. That feedback will be provided to the board. We do ask that you try to provide your feedback by Monday, so that the board has some time to consider, really Sunday, if possible. But we'll provide multiple reports to the board so that they can see all the feedback that comes in. Of course, a recording of this live stream and a recording of the interview will also be available online. And of course, if you have questions for Dr. Huff, you all can find her email very easily, angela.huff@cmcss.net. If there's nothing else, we will go ahead and end the session. Thank you all for being here.
And I want to thank you all for coming and being a part of this first session. It means a lot to me to have you here, and I thank you for taking your time on an evening night to come. So thank you. Thank you.
So much stuff.